Welcome to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. Today I'm going to start a two-part series, and it's going to be answering the question of, are Jewish people overrepresented in the United States government and important positions? And so going into this, I don't know what the results are going to be until I do the research. We've been working on this research for over a year, and it's not even complete, but I just got to publish it because the problem is there will be no Biden administration in 2025. And so then all this research will go to waste. But there's a lot of really good stuff in here. The reason why I'm separating into two different episodes is because I want to completely separate all the political stuff. So this first episode is going to cover Biden's cabinet. It's going to cover presidents and the VP families. It's going to cover three-letter agencies and Supreme Court justices, right? And we're just going to look at those categories. And then I'm going to make a corresponding video to this episode here during the next administration, because it's not going to be a Biden administration. Could be a Harris, could be a Trump administration, or it could be something else. But whatever it is, it'll be an entirely different cabinet and maybe different three-letter agencies, leaders and stuff like that. And so that we can compare and contrast, like say if it were Trump, it would be very interesting to see like how do the numbers hold up compared to Biden's. And then the next episode, which will be tomorrow, we'll do all types of stuff like CDC directors, big pharma CEOs, vaccines, health agencies, weapons contractors, weapons conglomerate CEOs, top American social media. We'll do all types of stuff. And so basically in both of these episodes, we're going to make the following assumption, and this is not precise because you just cannot ever get precise numbers. We're going to pretend that the population of the United States is composed of 59% white people. That might be a tiny bit low, but there's all different conflicting numbers out there. 2% Jewish people, which is pretty consistent, right? That Indian, and when I say that word, I mean dot, not feather, is going to be 1%. Native American is going to be 3% of the population. Hispanic is going to be 19%. Asians are going to be 7%, and Black's going to be 14%. I feel like that number is a tiny bit low. But whenever I'm calculating percentages, like I'm going to say, okay, these people are 1,190% overrepresented in this area. That's based on that formula, the percentage of populations. It's not 100% perfect, but also let me note too, when I'm looking up somebody's ethnicity and say they're a cabinet member or something, unless you're saying like, hey, you're a Jewish person. Okay, cool. You're Jewish. Fine. But there's a lot of them that they look like white people. I can't prove that they're not white people, so I just put ambiguous white as their category because they don't say whether they're white or not white, which if they're not white, they usually would say in our political climate that they are not white because they love that. And so then basically, so all the error goes towards white people. So it doesn't hurt the argument of, it helps the argument of overrepresentation by Jewish people. Okay, so the first thing we're looking at is the cabinet, and the cabinet's kind of tricky because there's different people count how many cabinet positions there are different ways. Like some people even put the vice president of the United States as a cabinet member. I'm not doing that. I choose not to. So I'm just doing 21 cabinet members, And so basically what we're going to find here out of 21 members of the cabinet, right? You're going to find these numbers, okay? 2 of them are Asians, 4 are Black, 5 are Jewish, 3 are Hispanic, 1 Indian, 1 Native American, and 5 white. Okay? So when you're looking at those numbers, basically the one that's the highest overrepresentation is Jewish people, which is 5 of 21 positions. Okay? Now, given that there's 21 positions and each position is 4.76% of the total positions available, right? And that Jewish people are 2% of the population of the United States, there's only a 42% chance, mathematically, that there would be 1 Jewish person out of 21 total cabinet people. Yet there's 5, right? And so then that makes an overrepresentation in Biden's cabinet of Jewish people by 1,190.48%. Okay. The only group that's underrepresented in Biden's cabinet are white people. And there are 5 of them, which is 23.81% of the total positions. As 59% of the population, they only are represented 40.36%. And so that basically means they hold 23% of the positions, but they're 59% of the population, so they're 40% underrepresented, right? Okay, actually, a second group is underrepresented, and that's the Hispanic population with 3 positions in Biden's cabinet out of 21. They hold 14.29% of the positions, but they make up 19% of the population. Therefore, they're underrepresented at 75%. So, okay. And then basically some of the other ones are overrepresented, but it's like you've got one Indian. And so that represents a 476% overrepresentation. But there was a 21% chance that there would be one Indian. There's one Native American. That's a 158% overrepresentation. Not too much. But there was a 63% chance that mathematically, that one person would be. Okay, and then black people get 19% of the positions, but they're 14% of the population. It's kind of right there. Like, we're not being nitpicky here. The interesting one is that Jewish people are 1,190%, 0.48% overrepresented, and that white people are drastically underrepresented. Okay, now, basically, so the one that stands out is the Jewish people. And so let's just look at who the 5 Jewish cabinet members are. Can you name them all, right? I could not. I would have missed one. Okay. Basically, they're the worst people in the cabinet. Like, you could say that's your opinion. They are all of the very worst ones, right? Like, you could say, I don't like Pete Buttigieg. You could say that. Like, whatever. You know, he's just vanilla to me. You know, he's neither here nor there. But all of the very worst ones are, oh, this guy's pretty terrible too. Okay. So basically, you got Antony Blinken, who's Secretary of State, is Jewish, right? And the problem is that, like, this guy, his number one interest is not the United States of America. So you have Secretary of State, who's a Jewish supremacist. And then you got this guy, Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, who's a Jewish supremacist. And he says, hey, look, we're not doing a genocide, even though I've been indicted by the ICC of doing a genocide. And here's my source. Antony Blinken, a Jewish supremacist in the United States, who's Secretary of State, who puts Israel before the United States. Okay, whatever. Second one, Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen. Just the worst. Attorney General Merrick Garland, Jewish, the worst. Alejandro Mayorkas, who's Secretary of Homeland Security, letting our borders completely go, the very worst, you know? And then if I was picking a 5th worst on here, I would say Xavier Becerra, I don't know how to say that, who's Health and Human Services, just because I'd have to pick a 5th one, you know? But the 5th Jewish person is Avril Haines, who's Director of National Intelligence. I don't know anything about her, I believe. I don't know anything about her. So there are 4 of the 5 worst, we'll say, on here. Okay, and I'm very interested in see, like, especially if there was a Trump cabinet, I would love to see, do the numbers go up or down of representation? I would love to see that. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the president families and the vice president families. Okay, so basically, Joe Biden and Jill Biden are obviously some white folk, right? And then between the two of them, they have 3 children. They have Beau, Hunter, and Ashley. And then you also have Kamala and the Doug Emhoff, the husband, the first man. I don't know. Anyways, and so of them, every single one of those people I named, except for Joe and Jill Biden, is married to a Jewish person, right? And so Doug Emhoff's Jewish. Kamala Harris doesn't have children, so every one of his children are at least half Jewish. All 3 of Biden's children married Jewish people. So Haley Oliver, Jewish, that was married to Beau. Then remember, Hunter's going to cheat with her later. Melissa Cohen, who Hunter Biden married, Jewish. Ashley Biden married a much older Jewish man, Howard Krein. And then, of course, Doug Emhoff. So anyways, if you said, except for Joe and Jill Biden, 100% of the president and their families, except for that one group, is all either Jewish or married to someone Jewish. That's pretty remarkable. So I don't really need to go into the percentages on that. If you look at if you look at those 5 groups, which is the Bidens, the Kamala, and just Kamala, Joe Biden, and then you look at the 3 Biden children. If you look at, like, what are the percentage chances that one of those would marry a Jewish person? The answer is, because Jews are 2% of the population and there's 5 different groups, that means there's a 10% chance that one of those would marry a Jewish person. And the answer is 4 of them married Jewish people. That's a 4,000% overrepresentation. And that's an underrepresentation by white people of 33.9%, considering they're 59% of the population. Okay. And then if you were to go down and add all of Doug Emhoff's children, which I don't think is that important because he's not the one elected to office, you would find just everyone is either Jewish or married to Jewish because he's Jewish. I don't really need to cover that. That's pretty obvious. Genetics, we'll say. So with the next administration, I would like to go over the whole thing. I was literally just looking up Tim Walz today, and I think I might make an episode about some interesting stuff I found on the Jewish learning side about him, but he's not Jewish, we'll say. Not married to a Jewish woman either. And so but that's for the future episode if they end up being the side that win. Okay, now we're gonna do 3-letter agencies. So like we picked the 3-letter agencies we want for this, and when we're thinking 3-letter agencies, we're really thinking ones related to security, like the enforcement arm of the executive system. So like later on, we'll talk about CDC and stuff like that. That's all FDA and the USDA. That's all going to be covered in the health topics on the next episode. So we just picked 4 and we don't know what we're going to find when we're going into this, So I picked the ATF, the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA. Okay, I checked those 4. And I considered doing the US Marshals, but they're not like the threat to the United States, I figured, because that's also covered by the judicial branch, not the executive branch. So I chose these 4. And of them, we're talking about the directors. 1 is Asian, and that's the NSA. And 1 is Jewish. That is the Steve Dettelbach of the ATF. And then both the CIA and the FBI have white directors, okay? So 2 white, 1 Jewish, 1 Asian. And so basically, I was surprised. I was assuming that all 4 of these are going to be white guys just betraying America. That's what I assumed going into this. It's actually a very high overrepresentation of Asians, even though there was a 28% chance that they would fill 1 position. That's not too far afield. There was only an 8% chance that 1 Jewish person would fill one of those positions, and sure enough, got it. And then, let's see, white people have a underrepresentation because they have 50% of the positions, and they're 59% of the population, which gives them an 84.75% underrepresentation. Okay, so that one's kind of interesting. This might change, and I'll be interested in the next time I cover this exact same thing to see how it changed, depending on if there's a drastic change in the administration. Now I'm going to do Supreme Court justices, and I'm doing that because, man, they're so important, honestly. And during a different administration, if they got 2, maybe 3, but 2, if they got 2 picks, it might change the makeup of the court, So basically, as of the filming of this, which is September 8th, 2024, basically on the Supreme Court justices, there are 0 Asian. Interesting. Oh, because they lost one that was Asian recently. 2 black, 1 Jewish, 1 Hispanic, and 5 white. So the 5 white Supreme Court justices mean that they hold 55.56% of the positions, and they're 59% of the country. So it's pretty fair representation, 94.16. Slightly underrepresented. I'm not going to complain about that, Hispanic is going to be low. They're 11% of the positions, and they're 19% of the population. Jewish is high, 11% of the positions, and 2% of the populations. But they had an 18% chance to get 1. So it is a 555% overrepresentation, but in this one category where there's 9 positions, I'm not going to complain, just like I didn't complain about the Indian or the Native American under Biden's cabinet having a okay chance, to get 1, and then they only have 1. You can't really complain about the overrepresentation. Black doing good at 22% of the positions for 14% of the population, only 158% overrepresentation, so I'm not complaining about that either. Though the last one was completely a diversity hire, which is unfortunate because there probably are black judges that you could find that are actually good, that you're not just picking them because you're black, right? So, because they're black, pardon me. And so basically, that concludes the research that I'm to present to you today. In Biden's cabinet, the representation was highly overrepresented for Jewish people. That was correct. And they were the majority. Okay, if you just did top 4 worst, I know I did top 5 worst for it, but if you did top 4 worst, they would all be Jewish. And they would be 4 out of 5 of the Jewish people. You just look at these other people, like you could just Google, all the House members, all the cabinet members, you've never heard of any of these people. And if you have heard of them, it's not like I've heard of Marcia Fudge before. She's Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, black. No, I haven't heard terrible stuff, All the worst ones are Jewish in the worst positions. In the most important positions, too. No, okay. Now, let me make one exception for that. Secretary of Defense is the first black Secretary of Defense, and it's Lloyd James Austin III, right? Now, this guy, I'm not complaining that he's a black guy. He's completely and totally incompetent. Like, the guy's completely worthless, but he's not betraying the United States to another country. The guy's just retarded, So I shouldn't say that, but it's true. He had to go in for a surgery or something. He's going to be incapacitated. He didn't send a letter. He didn't leave anybody in charge of Secretary of War. Oh, wait, they changed that. Secretary of Defense for the United States of America left nobody in charge. Went in for the surgery. Nobody knew he was gone. This is absurd. But I'm not complaining about him. I'd rather have that level of incompetence than Antony Blinken selling out our foreign policy to a foreign adversary. And I'm going to say adversary. You can look at our video on the U.S. Slippery if you don't believe me. Or to Janet Yellen, Secretary of the Treasury, who's tanking our entire economic system. Or who was the guy? Dang it, I can't remember his name right now. For goodness sakes, Alejandro Mayorkas, who's just opening our border to everybody. Or Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, who's doing all this political warfare. I mean, he's doing all the legal warfare. You know, he's behind all this stuff. And the January 6th prosecution is just so much terrible stuff. Anyway, so that's where we're at there. The president and the VP families won. It's insanely overrepresented Jewish. It's not an accident. It's not an accident when you go into history and you say, oh, you know, this guy's son's wife, like everybody, you know, it's not an accident. And it's interesting. I don't know if I should say it, but it is kind of interesting because it's like when you have a situation where it's like a guy, right? Like, say, let's go to Ashley Biden's husband, Howard Krein. Now, I haven't researched this guy too much, and he might have had children with a nice Jewish lady, so he has Jewish offspring. But by the way they run it in Jewish world, you only get Jewish descendants if it's a Jewish mother. So a Jewish guy going with a white chick and then them being married, if he never has Jewish children, his line of Jews will cease to exist, and he'd make that sacrifice just to be married to somebody close to power. That's rough. When a Jewish girl does it, like with Hunter and Beau Biden's wives, it's not, or Doug Emhoff's not even bad because he already had his kids, right? And I don't know who he had his kids with. I haven't researched that either. But I'm just saying the sacrifice is really great. So on the 4-letter agencies, there was a Jewish person there, of course. But that one wasn't the worst. And Supreme Court justice was not too bad either. Anyways, that's what I got for you today. Tomorrow I'm going to go into all the vaccine stuff and the CDC and all of that stuff. And we're just going to look and see. Some of them we're going to see massive overrepresentation. Sometimes we're not going to see it. And we'll just see what we got then. See you next time.